Brothers, I could not address to you as spiritual, but as worldly. So you are not in this category yet of people who have this deep mind of God as revealed by His Spirit. You're still in the worldly frame of mind, mere infants in Christ. I gave you milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for. And that's okay if you're an infant. It's okay to drink milk if you're an infant, but you have to grow up eventually. But indeed, you are still not ready. You are still worldly. For since there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not worldly? So they have not moved into the deeper things of God, into the category of deep spiritualism, which God has made available to them, and which they should be partaking in. They haven't gotten there yet. They're still stuck back in the worldly wisdom category that we read about in the earlier chapters. Are you not acting like mere men? For when one says, I follow Paul, and another says, I follow Apollos, are you not mere men? That's how everybody acts. That's how the old man acts. That's how the old creation acts. You should be past that by this point. And what, after all, is Apollos? And what is Paul? We are only servants, because through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each his task. I planted the seed. Apollos watered it, but God made it grow. You can't actually make the plant grow. One thing you're going to learn about pretty quickly if you try to grow plants, you can do what you can do, but you're not the one who actually makes that thing grow. Even if you have kids, you're not the one who's actually causing that kid to grow. You can do what you can do, and you have a job to do. You have a task, but you're not the one who's actually causing that change to occur. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The man who plants and the man who waters have one purpose, and each will be rewarded according to his own labor. So that's you're supposed to do. If your job is to plant the seed, then plant the seed. If your job is to water the seed, then water the seed. When in the last few years of my dad's life, a few years before he died, he had new trees planted in the front and backyards of our house. He had one planted in the backyard, one planted in the front yard. He I don't know what company. I don't know who he got to actually plant the tree. He didn't do it himself. He did try planting flowers in a spot in our front yard. That never really worked very well, but he tried. But he had someone. He had some tree people. What's the word I'm looking for here? Whatever the tree people are called. I have the word on the top of my head, but it's not coming right now. I'm thinking of aviaries. Well, that's birds. Anyway. He had them come and plant these trees. But then I spent the first couple of years watering them. Every other evening or whatever it was, for the first couple of summers at least, the first summer and beyond, I would go there and I would get a watering can out, or I'd set up the hose and I would water the trees for a period, like 20 minutes each or something like that. So that dog does not, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a dog outside who seems to be in misery. I don't know what's going on over there. Anyway, and so I didn't plant the tree, but I did water. My dad gave me the task of watering that tree for the first couple of years of its life until it was healthy enough to stand on its own. I don't water them anymore. I don't need to any longer. In fact, if anything nowadays, I want to cut them down. They're getting big enough, and I kind of want to cut them down. But that was my task, given to me by my father for the first couple of years of those trees' life. That was my purpose. Each will be rewarded according to his own labor. For we are God's fellow workers, and you are God's field, God's building. So we're building you up. We're trying to get you to be able to stand on your own. By the grace, and then you in turn would find someone else. That's how it would pass down. You in turn would disciple and build up someone else. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as an expert builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should be careful how he builds. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. He'll talk about this foundation imagery again in later letters. Jesus is the cornerstone and the capstone of the building. He's the foundation. If any man builds on this foundation, using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, his work will be shown for what it is. So there's three valuable materials there: gold, silver, and costly stones, and three consumable materials there: wood, hay, and straw. Because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each man's work. Gold, silver, and costly stones can survive fire. In fact, they're purified by fire. Wood, hay, and straw will be burned up on the fire. You know, we read back in the Numbers when they were, coming up with their purification system. God said the things that can be purified by fire, purify with fire. If fire burns something up, purify those things with water. The day he's talking about is going back to what he said in chapter 1, verse 8. He will keep you strong to the end, so you'll be blameless on the day of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, that does refer ultimately to the last day. We talked about that or when we covered that. Like, there is going to be like an actual end day of history, an end point, the resurrection. And that could be what he's referring to here. I mean, that would be the ultimate application of this. But there's, as we said before, we've been talking about this day of the Lord concept now for a long time. And I hope by now you've internalized this idea that the day of the Lord doesn't always just refer to that one last day of history, that one end point in time that still hasn't happened even now. But it can have a more general application to any time the Lord comes in judgment on a nation or a family or even a person. Whether it's the very last day of history. Now, these people have been dead for 1900 plus years. Okay, their day of the Lord didn't happen on the very last day of history. All right. They'll be raised on the last day of history. But that's not ultimately what it means, what he's talking about here for them, because they all perished by the time that happened, long perished. So when the day of judgment comes, you're like I said before, it's either going to be a day of salvation or a day of condemnation. And if you're ready for the Lord, it will be a day of salvation. If you're not, it will be a day of condemnation. When the hard times come, when the trouble comes, when the hardships occur, and they will, even before the last end point in time, the end time day of the Lord, which serves as the marker of the end of history. Even before then, like when the day of judgment comes, whether you're ready for it or not, your work will stand. In this case, he's saying that, when the day comes, your work will be proven genuine or not. When trouble comes, when hardship comes, or even when the last day actually happens, if you built a solid foundation, your house will stand. It goes back also to what Jesus was saying about building your house on the rock. When the storms come and the winds blow, the foolish man's house will fall because he hasn't built on it right. The wise man's house will stand. It's a similar thing here. When the day of judgment comes, whatever that form that may take for you, if you built your house well, if your foundation and your house is built well, it'll stand. If not, it will fall. Or in this case, get burned up. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each man's work. If what he has built survives, he will receive his reward. If it's burned up, he will suffer loss. He himself will be saved, but only as one escaping through the flames. So it'd be like escaping a burning house. You're still alive, but everything you had in your house is gone. If you built your house well enough to withstand the flames, then you keep the stuff that's in your house. In this case, you didn't, and so you lost your stuff within you. You're still alive, but nothing you have is left. You have to start over. Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit lives in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him. This is what they accused Jesus of wanting to do. When he said, tear this temple down, I'll raise up in 3 days. He was pointing towards the new way that God will dwell with his people will be to literally be inside them. It won't be just in this building any longer. The temple was still standing at the time that Paul is writing here. But you say that's not even relevant anymore. God doesn't actually dwell in that building anymore. He now dwells in you. You're God's temple. Everyone in the ancient world would have understood the concept of a temple. This is one of the things that makes it hard for us because we don't. We have long since lost our concept of the temple as a dwelling place for God. So everyone in the ancient world, literally every human being who would have been alive at any point in time when this book was written, from the beginning to the end, from the days of Moses, when he wrote down his account of Israel's history and his time with them in the desert, until the last word was written in the New Testament, literally everyone who would have lived at any point in history up to that point in time would have understood the concept of a temple. It was a dwelling place for the deity. It's where the deity made his rest with his people. We today don't have temples, okay? We have church buildings, and some people put more emphasis on these buildings than they should. But we have long since lost our connection with the temple concept. This is probably one of the most basic ways in which our understanding of the world and their understanding of the world are different. Because everybody would have understood the idea of a temple and what it was supposed to do and function and what it was supposed to symbolize and all that. Whereas today, it's a concept to us. It's not something that we don't base our lives around it. In fact, most people don't even really understand the concept of it. But a temple was a dwelling place of a god. Even the Jews thought that about their God. That's actually one of the things that God didn't like. He didn't want them to think that he was limited only to that temple. His name was there. He chose to put his name there. But he himself was not bound to that temple. And he wasn't bound to the second one. In fact, I'm not entirely clear if his glory ever filled the second temple at all. And so now, Paul is saying that you're the temple. That physical building that still exists in Jerusalem at this point in time, that's just a building. Okay, you're the actual temple. Now, don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, the dwelling place of God, and that God's Spirit lives in you? Eventually, as we'll read about at the end of Revelation, everything will be God's temple. God's dwelling place will be everywhere. That's why in the world to come, there will be no need for extra light sources. Because God himself will be everywhere and will be the light of all the world. And the entire universe, everything that's left in the cosmos, will be the dwelling place of God. If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him. For God's temple is sacred, and you are that temple. Do not deceive yourselves. If any one of you thinks he is wise by the standards of this age, he should become a fool so that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight. As it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. That's from Job, chapter 5, verse 13. And again, the Lord knows that the thoughts of the wise are futile. So no matter how much you may scheme and plant and plot, it's not going to work. We read about that in 2nd Psalm. This particular quote is from Psalm 94:11. But the beginning of Psalm 2 is, why do the nations rage and peoples plot in vain? It's all futile. Okay? Our schemes, our plans, our plots, our wisdom is never going to amount to anything in God's sight. So no more boasting about men. Okay, forget about this. Don't do this anymore. All things are yours. Whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or the present or the future, all are yours. And you are Christ, and Christ is of God. So you don't need to put your stock in a particular pastor or preacher or speaker or politician. That's not where you find your identity. That's not where in our day and time, we would talk about finding our identity. That's not where you find your worth, is in putting it in this figure that you're saying, I am with this guy. I am with this political party. Or I'm with this pastor wannabe. Okay, it's like that's not where you find your value. That's not where you find your worth. That's not where you find your identity. And if that is where you're putting your value, your worth, or your identity, it's a sign of immaturity. It's a sign that you're still bound by the wisdom of this world. You're still thinking too much like the old man, the old world, the old creation that's being done away with, that's coming to nothing. You've got to put that behind you. You've got to think like a new creation, think like a new man. Everything is yours. You're of Christ. Christ is of God. And you're God's dwelling place. Again, like I said, at the end of Revelation, everything is going to be God's dwelling place. So you need to think to search for the deep spiritual truths of God, and not waste your time chasing after the so-called wisdom, which is really foolishness of this world.